Today on Co-op for Two, a quick spoiler-free review of Cryptic Killer's Murder at Merivale Manor. Stay tuned to find out why I think this is one of the best cold case games you can buy. Some preliminaries first. I purchased all of these games that I play on the channel myself. I have no relationship with any publishers and no sponsors. This video will be spoiler-free, deliberately vague, but I'll try to give you my impression of where this falls in the genre of mystery, deductive, cold case, document dump games. You can purchase this currently in 2023 for about $20–25 on Amazon, which is about average for this kind of game, maybe a little bit on the lower side. The Cryptic Killers series, there are about 7 of the games. They're all available on Amazon. They're all cold case document dump games. Now, sometimes people get confused what the difference is between this genre and the more common puzzle narrative games. And the difference here is that these games aren't full of logic spatial puzzles. They're much more heavily focused on presenting a narrative of a real crime and lots of documents. Frequently you get all the documents at once, maybe 30 documents to go through, police reports, autopsy reports, lots of witness statements, maybe some diagrams, and you're trying to reconstruct what happened and solve the mystery. Frequently it's set up as a cold case that you're trying to reopen. But heavier focus on narrative, heavier focus on deduction, very few, usually no puzzles, but occasionally some ciphers. I have reviewed the 3 hardest ranked games in the Cryptic Killers series. You can watch that spoiler-free review on the channel. And I've also played through now 4 Cryptic Killers games in full live on the channel. You can watch those, including a playthrough of Murder at Merivale Manor, which took about 8 hours for us to play. It'll take you much less without breaks and discussion, about 3 hours. This case is rated at a 4 of 5 difficulty. You can see the company is very nice to rate all the difficulty levels of their games. So I have played 3 other 4 out of 5 difficulties. That's as high as they go in this series. And then they've got a bunch that are significantly easier and some a little bit shorter. And I'll talk about the difficulty of this game and who I think it's for as we go. The other thing you should know is that, fairly typical of this genre, you do need the internet to do the final part of the game, to check your answer, but you also need it within the game, but only for a very brief, narrow aspect that's very well defined. So you can't just go off searching Google and doing random searches. You don't have to have a Facebook account. It's just for a very specific part of it. All the Cryptic Killer games have that one same element, one little part that you have to get online to get more information. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to leaf through the actual contents of this with you so you can see what kinds of stuff you get with this game. But we're going to go very quickly, very briefly. This is all stuff you would see the moment you open this box. So I don't consider this spoilers. But if you're particularly sensitive to this stuff, you really want to go in completely blind, not even see the kinds of documents, then you might look away or skip ahead. There'll be timestamps in the video. A little bit of instructions here. Then we've got some letters. We've got a nice full brochure with diagrams. More excerpts from material, more excerpts from book, Lots of text, you can see. Double-sided, full 2-page texts. Clippings. More diagrams, some photos of people. People are overly concerned with spoilers these days. I wouldn't stress it. This is stuff you'll forget and is of no importance that you see what these are. Okay, we've got some various other documents. Map, more documents. Okay. And the nature of these games is you could go through this documentation in any order you wanted, though I'll come back to that at the end. So there you have it, a good look at the variety of documents and quantity. It'll say somewhere here how many pieces of evidence. I think in this one here we see 30 pieces of evidence and online content. There's a small amount of online content. It's not a key, it is a sort of key part, but it's not a large part of the game. And then we have a little description of the game. It's set in 1927. It's about the death of someone. And then the story is that we're sort of reopening the case to try to solve this 1927 murder. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you some pros, some cons, then we'll sum up with my final thoughts. There are a lot of pros in this set. In fact, this is one of my favorite cold case games. It's got a very compelling story. This murder in 1927 is told very well, and now you're revisiting it in 2022. Very well fleshed out cast of characters, very interesting. The sense of atmosphere, the amount of time spent on setting up the narrative and the atmosphere of this place you're in, mostly set in this one manor, is quite unusual. And if you like that kind of thing, if you like being immersed in these worlds that you're trying to study and caring about the people and feeling like you're really there and all the people are differentiated and interesting, this is really the one for you. Tons of room for debate about the psychology of people. That's something we often miss in these games. It's common that there are lots of interesting facts that you're working with, but one of the things that we're frequently missing in these games is sort of chewing on the psychology of people. Why would they do what they do? What's more plausible explanation for someone's behavior? That kind of stuff, we really get it here. We get a deep dive into the psychology of the characters, which is really interesting. If you play with a group and like to debate these things, and debate what's more likely, whose motives you believed is someone telling the truth, this is a rich playground for that kind of stuff. If you saw me going through it, there's tons of documents here and much more heavy on the reading than most of these games. It's very common that we get lots of documents that are sort of tabular in form. This one has a lot more reading than we're used to, but it's so well done and so atmospheric, so thematic, that it really is enjoyable. And in fact, we played a big chunk of this game before we even got past just sort of background scene setting. But having said that, there's also a lot to figure out here. There are spatial maps, logic stuff, timeline stuff. There's even a little bit of a cipher. There's a little bit of everything here in terms of what you have to figure out. And there's connections between bunches of documents. It's really a satisfying variety, a good tour of the space of possible sort of deductive mysteries to solve. And it does reward deep thinking. All of the Cryptic Killers games in general are sort of consistently high quality. There is a little bit of a focus in the Cryptic Killers series on sort of trying to generate these aha moments, and you will have them in all of the Cryptic Killers games. It's one of the reasons it's one of my favorite series in this genre, and this one is no exception. You would be well advised to think long and hard about the details of this case before you try to solve it. There is a good hint system, there is a good, generous epilogue story, and the internet use is enjoyable. I will come back to that at the end, some suggestions I have for playing it though. Let's talk a little bit about some of the cons. This would be a way to think about this, think if this game is not quite for you. So I've said that one of the real focuses of this game, even more so than any other game in the Cryptic Killers series, and more than most cold case games is the amount of sort of background story reading that you'll do just to set the scene. So if you don't like that, if your group is not big into reading through long newspaper articles and stuff, then this might not be the one for you. There's a little bit of busy work here in terms of cipher and codes. We don't normally love having to spend time on that. It's fun to solve it, but then typically it becomes less pleasant when you're just having to do busy work. So you might want to keep that in mind if you hate that kind of stuff. There is definitely the possibility in this game of attacking the documents in an order that might steal some of the fun from you. And that's a very tricky part of all of these games. Some of these games stage them in multiple acts so that it makes sure you're sort of bottlenecked and solve one thing before you get to the next. This one doesn't have that. This one throws all of the documents at you. You can tackle them in any order. And you'll frequently have to go back and forth, but I think there's more than the usual chance here that you could have the game tell you something and rob you of the opportunity to figure it out yourself if you do things in the wrong order. And I'm going to have some advice for how I think you should play this game to avoid that. And then in the end, there's a possibility, there's a little bit of a chance that some of the details that are less believable than others, that feel maybe a little cartoonish, that you might have a little bit of problem with that. It requires a little bit of suspension of disbelief to play this. If you're really a stickler for that, if you don't want to play any of these games that have even the slightest whiff of something being unrealistic, then maybe this is not for you. Okay, final thoughts. Of the 4 Cryptic Killers games I've played, and I'm a big fan of the series in general, this is my favorite, and I think it was probably the favorite of most of the group that I played with, either the top ranked or second to top ranked. And most of that is due to the story, the narrative, the skill of the narrative, storytelling, and atmosphere, but also the core mystery stuff. It may be my favorite single short session cold case game. Now I say that it took us 8 hours to play it, but there are some longer multi-part cold case games that have their own appeal. Of the single session games, this might be my most favorite. And the entire Cryptic Killers series, I've said, is one of the most consistently high quality series. I do think this is probably the go-to series to introduce someone to the genre. Having said that, this is definitely of the medium-high difficulty, and I would suggest if you're completely new to the genre, put this on your wish list, play one of the easier ones first, and then if you like it, come to this. This is also for the people who love narrative. You cannot go wrong here. I would give you the same advice I give with most of these games, which is try to find someone else, at least one other person to play with. And you know my sweet spot for the name of this channel. I prefer 2 people playing these games. I think that is the sweet spot. That's the best way to play. But if you play these harder games solo, it's very hard to give them the attention that they deserve and take your time. One tends to rush and get frustrated when one's playing these solos. So do take your time with these games. Really think through what's going on. So here's some advice, though, wrapping up. If you're new, try an easier one first. Cryptic Killers is a great series to jump into this genre. If you've never played one of these, pick up one of the easier Cryptic Killers games and then make your way to this. Take your time. Try to really enjoy the story and atmosphere of this case in particular. Force yourself to take breaks and debate and discuss theories. That is one of the things we enjoy the most when we play these through on the channel live. And if you don't do that, if you don't stop every once in a while and say, okay, let's figure out what we know, let's try to summarize our theories, let's consider alternatives. If you don't stop and do that, you really run the risk of the game revealing answers to you before you had a chance to figure it out. And then my last piece of advice, which is related to that, which is the most practical advice I can give you, I think for this case in particular, I have a suggestion about the order that you tackle this stuff. And my suggestion is read things in order. So sometimes when playing with a group with these cold case games, people sort of divide up the evidence and say, okay, you look at this, you look at this, you look at this, you look at this. I really think this game, more than others, would benefit from the whole group, from everyone focusing on one piece of evidence at a time, reading it, listening to it with full attention. Go through it in order. With one exception. Save the internet part for last. All of the cryptic killers seem to use the same basic idea that there's an email account, an online account you can log into to get additional information. And it's tempting, since you find out about that as the first thing you find out about, it's very tempting to sort of want to say, okay, let's find the way to get into the email account and read that. I really think that would be ill-advised here. I think you should save that for last. Play through all the documents, then access the email account. That's my advice. If you do play through it, I'd love to hear your thoughts, either on this video, or you can come and watch our full playthrough of the game after you've played it, see where we differ from you, see if you got stuck in places we didn't, or vice versa, and you can leave your thoughts there. If you know of another mystery game you think I should play through on the channel, or if you're interested in joining us for a playthrough or helping us decide what games to play, you could stop by the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel. There's a link on the About tab of this YouTube channel. If you like these videos and would like to see more, please consider subscribing, giving this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next video.